Virginia Hammon from the Alliance for Just Money and from U.S. Money, what it is, why we why. Well, I'm going to try to put this up here then. This book, beautiful little book, U.S. Money, what it is, why we must change, how we can. And I got to accompany Virginia to a convention prior to the pandemic, and we had a great time pushing awareness and creating awareness and trying to move people for the 2020 election in this direction. And then COVID happened. And another beautiful book that Virginia, this book is Virginia and Mark Pash. Mark Pash made reference to it too. And this one, Wheels of Commerce, Virginia is a quilt person, a quilter, and there is beautiful quilts and all parts. You can take little blocks of this and it's all about beautiful art and about money and society and the movement. And Virginia has wonderfully taken her time to think and work with food to farm and to think about parity, and she's going to give us a new look with using these glasses, I believe. Thank you, dear Virginia, and the floor is yours.
All right. Well, I am going to take a new look at it, and I just want to start by saying that the reason I really dug down into parity was because a group of people who I dearly love and admire are very much sold on it. So I've spent a great deal of time studying parity to do my best to understand what it is they love about it. And in the course of my studies, some of parity seems precocious and some of parity seems preposterous. And I have had lots and lots of questions that I have certainly peppered the parity group with. And the answers I got didn't satisfy me. But what I want to do here, my hat, which I'm not wearing, is off to Stephen for allowing me in this venue to raise my questions. That really is a tribute to his willingness to have alternative points of view. And I really appreciate that. I have the little picnic box because kind of the image that came to my mind was that when you sometimes see of someone sitting at a table in the park with, here's what I think, prove me wrong. So I want to say I would be perfectly happy to be proved wrong. These are questions, and I'm explaining my reasons for having those questions, and I'd be perfectly happy to be proved wrong. The question I'm asking is, does this parity concept serve the just money movement? Or for that matter, the food justice movement? The Agricultural Adjustment Act did make sense in 1933 and 1938 to food advocates and to Congress who passed it. But does it still make sense in 2021? That's my fundamental question. I would really like to reframe the parity. It is in some ways technical jargon. I can't walk out there on the street and use that term and have people go, oh, okay. I think I have a pretty good idea what you mean by that. I think food justice or just food serves much better. And food justice and just money both make perfect sense. And there's a synchronicity and a natural partnership, I think, between having just food and having just money. Both are essential systems. I fully agree, Jerry elaborated on that eloquently, that food is a fundamental system, as is money. And both systems, all systems, have formative values. And certainly the values of the food system and the money system inform our culture. So the food system currently has values, and those values inform and form our spirits, minds, and bodies. The money system has values, and those values inform and form our communities, our nation, and our international relations. And we've had 3 days of fabulous people explaining the depth of the impact of both these two systems. So the money and food systems are intertwined. They really rhyme. If you think about it, the characteristics and values of both the money system and the food system are junk money, junk food. Bigger's better, eat more, buy more. Profits are more important than food. They're more important than food safety. Monoculture in the food system, monopoly in the money system. The few rule the many. The big farmers have the clout, small farmers don't. There is an indebtedness that is systemic. I would argue that the real indebtedness in the farm system right now, some of the most dangerous indebtedness, is what we're extracting from the soil. You know, that debt to the water and the soil that is being exploited and degraded. And then in both systems, that's currently okay. But in both systems, there's an insecurity. Will I survive? Both systems are vulnerable to collapse. And in terms of our goals and values, just money and food justice, we want the same thing. You know, we see that interconnectedness. We want everyone to have access. No one's systemically privileged. We want health, sustainability. Those are our highest priorities. We want a diverse and inclusive, democratic systems, both for our money and for our food. And we don't want any systemic debt involved in creation of either our food supply or our money supply. We want regeneration and innovation encouraged. We want systems that are sustainable. So I want to emphasize, I'm not disagreeing at all with the goals of parity as stated. And I totally agree that food justice is possible and practical. So when I ask, well, what's standing in the way? I mean, certainly there are all kinds of things that have happened in the last 100, 200 or more years that have had an impact on the way we farm. But of all of those reasons why we're in trouble, I would say the current money system is the most significant. So money is the foundation of an economy. That is the soil out of which all of our economy grows. And just money makes food justice possible. And if I were making a presentation to farmers, this would be part of my presentation. And I would say, join us, because this is critical. Just money is critical. So yeah, that would be my pitch. But of course, I would explain the money system, which I think I'm assuming we all know that wouldn't be needed here. So parity is a word that does have a special meaning in this particular context. And my question is, does that parity concept make sense in 2021 or moving into 2022? So for what is meant by parity, you just had an hour and a half of what is meant by parity. So, and some of this just duplicates what was said. The idea of parity stemmed from a continuous search for a concrete measure of economic justice for the farmer. And that was first named fair exchange value. That's from the USDA's Chapter 4 parity prices, parity ratio, and feed price ratio. So the goal of basic parity is economic justice for farmers, to assure a satisfactory and sufficient income for farmers and a sustainable, healthy food economy. And of course, NORM expands this to all raw material producers. But so basic parity is the same thing as food justice. I think when we go out to talk to farmers, it would serve us to talk about food justice or just food. Although many farmers are familiar with parity, so farmers might catch the jargon, but the rest of the population won't. So I took from the Agricultural Adjustment Act the definition of parity, and Jerry may have done this as well. As applied to income, it shall be that gross income from agriculture which will provide the farm operator and his family with a standard of living equivalent to those afforded persons depend upon other gainful occupation. And that parity law included a long list, actually a relatively long list, of policies: the fair and satisfying farm prices, a price floor for farm products, production quotas so that you didn't have overproduction. It included the protective tariffs, crop insurance, non-recourse loans so the farmers didn't have to put their farm on the line. But the question comes up, how can we know whether any of those policies were what caused success? The difficulty is that you're talking about a ratio or relationship. And again, the National Agricultural Statistics Service said high or low prices for farm products are not in themselves of primary significance. Of far greater importance is what farm products will buy in terms of food, clothing, feed, machinery, fertilizer, and other items farmers need. So you're talking about how and what are we going to measure success? How are we going to measure whether the farmers actually are doing well? And the law suggests we can have a ratio of what their income is to what it costs them to live. And we want that ratio to be 100%. We want farmers to have everything they need, satisfying and sufficient income so that they can buy what they need to buy. The challenge, though, is that this is a circular and dynamic economy. The agricultural economy, when a farmer pays a price, his prices are impacted by what the seller has to pay for raw materials and food. So this is circular. It goes around and around, as they've noted. But it means that supply and demand anywhere in that cycling economy matters. Externalities matter, war matters, weather matters, farm size and approach matters. A farmer who is has 1,000 acres in one crop is going to have different costs than a small family farmer who's using biointensive techniques and rotating his crops. The innovations in technology matter. When you go back to the beginning of the 19th century, there were animals pulling plows. And now we have warehouses where they're regulating the light and the water and everything else with computer algorithms, or farmers now who check in on satellites to put the perfect amount of water. So how do you reduce that complex system to a simple ratio? In the 1930s, the solution was to have indexes, averages, and a base period, and base periods, actually. So looking at, well, what are we going to measure? The indexes. Jerry mentioned the national income accounts by Simon Kuznets, for which he won a Nobel Prize in economics. He wrote a 60-page introduction to his national income account report, in which he said, I'm leaving out fire, as Jerry mentioned, but he also said, I'm going to leave out the entire carrying economy. I'm going to leave out what families do. I'm going to leave out what was essentially women's work, which we still continue to do with our GDP. That's a pretty significant absence in the data. Also, at that time, there was an acceptance of some level of exploitation of labor. And there was a counting on trickling down. If we measure what the big farmers do, then it'll reach the other farmers. So the indexes in the law look at originally it was 5 staple commodity crops. And the issue is you can't really measure lettuce because it goes really straight from the farmer. It's not stored anywhere. So in trying to solve that problem, they said, well, we'll just look at cotton, wheat, corn, rice, and tobacco. And the tobacco was struck out in 2004, and somewhere along the way they added peanuts. And again, the idea was that if you knew what was going on with these staple commodity crops, that would trickle out and down to all the other farmers. This is from the law and what is a covered commodity. And this is current. So the law has been tinkered with over the years, and they've added wheat, oats, barley, corn, grain, sorghum, long grain rice, medium grain rice, pulse crops, soybeans, other oilseeds, and peanuts. But what they can't add, because it wouldn't work, are the fruits and the vegetables that have to go directly to market. So those aren't counted. They're assumed they'll be okay. Well, what are the unintended consequences when you focus on staple crops? And what's the view of food and farming that underlies that focus on staple crops? Why do we care more about corn and wheat than we care about lettuce and tomatoes? What happens when you subsidize certain crops or raw materials and not others? And I would suggest there's a very clear story about what happens when you focus on subsidizing certain crops. If you look at tobacco and oil, tobacco was taken out in 2004. So what happened for 70 years promoting and subsidizing tobacco? Did that really serve us? Now, the second thing that the indexes do, besides having core, is they took averages. And again, from the statistical service, they say parity is a national concept, and parity prices are not computed by state commodity grades or for specific markets. So here's again the definition of averages. The adjusted base price of any agricultural commodity as of any date shall be one, the average of the prices received by farmers for such commodity, and at such times as the secretary may select, the ratio of the general level of prices received by farmers for agricultural commodities during such period to the general level of prices received by farmers for agricultural commodities during the period January 10th to December 14th inclusive. This was the original act that required that those prices be compared to 1910 and 1914. And then Jerry's correct that in the 50s, that was changed to a rolling average. But what happens again? What are the unintended consequences of using national averages for your data? Well, the evidence says they disadvantaged small farms. They advantaged large farms. They disadvantaged biointensive, regenerative, multi-crop farming, and they advantaged monoculture. So Parity says we have a yardstick. We can look at these golden years. And actually, that second one seems to vary depending on who you're reading. 1910 to 1914 seems to be a constant. 22 to 29, or I think Perry had something different in her last presentation. And then 42 to 52 shows up, as does 47. Anyway, they change slightly. So if we look at these base years where the 1910 to 1914 period was chosen as the base because it was considered a relatively normal period when price relationships were generally stable across all sectors of agriculture and non-farm industries. In 1933, the Secretary of Agriculture's economic advisors said the 1910 to 1914 base period was selected because it represented a period of considerable agricultural and industrial stability, with equilibrium between the purchasing power of city and country. It was free from major economic and political disturbances, and prices of most major products were considered to be fair relationship to prices paid by farmers. So again, this is the Statistical Services report on the history of parity. And Parity argues, well, we have a yardstick that the mathematical ratio between averaged national data of this limited scope from historical periods 80 to 111 years ago in the past yields a scientific standard against which the present can be measured. And I still have the question, how can that assumption be rationally justified? I mean, who in 1910 to 1914, for whom was that dynamic equilibrium? The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was in March 1911. Those were the work conditions. It was primarily women who died in that fire, but the work conditions were national. The undermining, and then from the Statistical Service also has a report on the past century for Black farmers. And they said the undermining of opportunity for Blacks to develop independent farming, in many cases by the use of peonage, existed well into the post-World War II era. Women didn't even have the vote, and our labors were not counted even in the data that is being used for Parity's claims. Upton Sinclair published The Jungle in 1906, and I can still picture the finger in the sausage. If we look at the base years from 1947 to 1949, you have to ask, what impact did World War II and post-war circumstances and investments have on the economy? How were benefits distributed in these years between large and small farmers? What other factors account for this period of relative prosperity and middle-class growth? If you are interested in what happened to the middle class, I highly recommend a 1-hour lecture that Elizabeth Warren gave when she was a professor on the differences in our whole society between mid-century and I think she said it in about 2000, and all the different various factors that had an impact on both the dynamic equilibrium of that period and then what has changed. I'm not, having these criticisms and questions is not new to me. Back in 1946, in the Journal of Farm Economics, Geoffrey Shepard said the inaccuracy of parity price as a measure of net farm income results from the fact that net farm income varies not only with prices, but with quantities produced. It also varies with the cost of productions, that is with the quantities as well as the prices of the goods and services used in production. Now I've forgotten whether he was a professor, John D. Black, wrote an entire book, not unsympathetic to parity pricing, but questioning the validity of them. So when I look at how is this success claimed for parity measured, from my point of view, it looks like the measurement itself is flawed. Using averages is flawed. And then using the base years is also flawed. And when we ask, well, has it been a success? As Jerry pointed out, no. Soil degradation is widespread. Family farms are vanishing. Farm debt is crippling farmers. Farmers are committing suicide at incredible rates. Agricultural chemicals are in our food, water, air. We have food deserts, cheap junk food. Healthy organics are harder to get, and regenerative agriculture is still out there on the fringe. So when people are asking, well, what went wrong? Certainly Parity, the group, is saying, well, it's the fact that the law has been tinkered with. Special interests made that happen. And if the concept had been truly applied, that ratio for the base periods maintained, then everything would have been fine. That it is all about that price. And that's what I'm questioning. And I want to take another look at parity. Goes beyond just saying if farmers get paid prices, all will be well. They make three very kind of outstanding claims. That there's a natural law of economics that parity for farmers will equal parity for the whole economy, that there is a trade turn of 7 to 9, and that parity regulates the value of money. So if you're looking at claims like that, I do think it's really important to look at what was the worldview lens through which the people who made those claims were looking. So most of these claims were developed from the 20s to the 50s. So what characterized those years? Well, one, there was an industrial mindset. kind of a linear mechanical cause effect. We do this, that happens. Those years, and we continue to be enthralled with science. Those years, there were incredible discoveries happening in chemistry, physics, astronomy, medicine, agriculture, the green revolution. And we were in love with that technology, as we continue to be. A chemically enhanced life, there are more profits. What could go wrong? Data science was new. It was exciting. In the 1920s, the USDA issued its Purchasing Power Index series. And then by the 1930s, you had national income accounts that we've mentioned previously. And data was just thought to be powerful. If you do the math, you've done all you need. And now that math proves the science. And we still do this. I would draw your attention to the David G. and the Gaussian-Coppola formula in the year 2000, he came up with a mathematical formula that our entire fire sector figured eliminated the possibility of risk. And basically, by following his formula, it took the market down. Although he himself, just as Kuznets said, hey, be careful what you do with my national income accounts. Xi also said, hey, be careful what you do with my mathematical formula. There's risk there. So the worldview lens in the 1920s to 50s also had the white male capital owner privilege and domination was simply assumed. So nobody was looking at what role women and caring played in the economy. And as noted earlier, if you were Black or brown, you weren't part of what was being calculated either. And there was an obliviousness to consequence. And you could, Jerry went over some of this. The aquifer is down by 50%. Agricultural land is vanishing. Fertile soil is vanishing. Our water, soil, and food is all contaminated, and the middle class vanishing, nuclear waste contamination. The idea that more and bigger is better, again, this has continued to present day. And when you read Walters and Wilkins and the early Parity people, they had a very poor understanding of money and money creation. In prosperity within our grasp, Charles B. Ray says, bringing out the money. How can we withdraw money from the reservoir soundly? The method now being used to increase the flow is by federal borrowings and expenditures. The sound method of drawing money from the capital reservoir is by the annual production and sale of goods and services. In other words, earning it. Well, we know more and better, right? So just a summary, mindset science, data science, white male capital, oblivious to consequence, more and bigger is better, and a poor understanding of money. And if we take one more look at these extended claims, the law of economics, trade turn, and Parity regulating the value of money, at the root of these is what they're calling this natural law of economics. The idea that raw material income determines the health of the whole economy, that it turns 7 to 9 times. And repeated often is the idea that these raw material prices cause parity prices for the rest of the economy. And I think because Jerry did so well, I don't think I need any of my quotes here on, Jerry covered all those. So what makes extended parity a natural law of economics? Well, again, I would say you have to look at, well, when was this developed and what were they thinking? The idea that all new wealth comes from the earth and acts according to natural laws is a very 20th century physical science viewpoint. The law of thermodynamics, that what is of value deteriorates. This is also kind of a tangible, it's what's real and solid is what is important. And I would say we're moving, this is the age of Aquarius coming. Good. put a little song in your head, that we know now there is more. We need to also pay attention to spiritual wealth, the heart. We've had several people over these few days talk about the importance of the heart. So that the assumption that's made is that real wealth is that which decays. That's the law of thermodynamics. Therefore, the most important products, those worthy of counting and considering, are tangible. And if you test that assumption, again, go back to, well, what assumption and worldviews underlie the idea that because money as a tool is not real wealth, which I totally agree with, that all intangibles are not a form of wealth? Well, what would that, seems to me that's a composition division fallacy, thinking that what is true about one part of something has to be applied to all or other parts of it. So when we consider human needs, shouldn't we count and measure the intangibles that are as an important form of wealth? Babies need human touch and conversation to thrive. Children need care, attention, and hugs. Adults need rest and recreation, cultural enrichment, healthy, connected communities. These are all forms of wealth, and they're not being measured in the formulas that are looking at whether or not the times, they even call them golden years, were golden. And we know they were certainly not golden. So a second assumption is that because raw materials are the beginning of a production cycle for tangible products, and because humans must be fueled with food to create the intangibles, therefore, paying raw material producers a fair exchange price, a parity price, will ensure a fair exchange prices throughout the whole economy. Well, how do we test that assumption? Is that a valid assumption? It seems to me, again, it's that false cause, or this is a different fallacy, actually. It's a false cause fallacy, that presuming that a real or perceived relationship between things means that one is the cause of the other. And I guess you could test that if you went and redid all the data. So we're going to include what life is like for Blacks, for Browns, for women. We're going to put all this, does the mom have time to bond with her baby? We put all that rich information into a database. Then would that relationship between raw materials and the whole economy remain the same? I don't know. Would the relationship between other sectors of the economy and the whole economy be different, or would that be the same? What if we looked at making sure all parents have a satisfactory and sufficient income? Would that multiply 7 times? What if we made sure all our educators had a fair income? Would that multiply 7 to 9 times? How about public servants or banjo players? I think you have to test that hypothesis. And is there data that would better reflect overall economic and social well-being? So the assumption is also made that because the ratio of raw material ag income to the national income was 7 to 1 in those base years, and evidently, given the data you were collecting, you had a fixed kind of set of data, it did enable a prediction of that same relationship within that data set. That somehow that's a natural trade turn and economic law. I'm going to take a sip of water here. Parity makes the claim, one of the other claims is that when you have parity, it reduces debt in the whole economy. And that's easy enough to test. We can test the facts. Was debt reduced in the base years from 1910 to 1914 or 1942 to 1952? No. Curiously, I could not find the all debt prior to those 52 to those years, earlier. But what I did find was you can go back to 1916 and look at the total money supply. And again, for some reason, Fred doesn't want to tell you the exact numbers of how much money there was. So this graph is the percent change in the money supply. Well, all of us know money has to be created in the system since 1913 by issuing debt. So we can look at the changes in how much debt was, or how much money was created during these years. And what we see is that from 1910, to 1915, or what it was here, it didn't. It was kind of up and down. We've also been given those years 22 to 29. And again, at least half the time, the debt was going up. It wasn't steady. We can look at the 42 to 52 period, and that's pretty much way above. We were creating way more money. If we had parity prices, it is not reflected in the level of debt during these base years. So this claim, which is, if it were true, it would be fabulous, that parity for raw materials would regulate the value of money in the entire economy. I sure need to see more evidence. And when I looked at the consumer price index, which I do know has been tinkered with over the years, but from 1910 to 1914, the CPI data begins in 1913, so we can't look at that specifically. But from 1913 to 1914, the value of the dollar dropped 1%. If you look at 42 to 52, the value of the dollar during those years dropped to 62 cents, a cumulative inflation of 38%. So if we had parity during those years, it was not regulating the value of money. So by the official record, the value of money did not remain steady in the base years. So my question is, what records are backing up that claim that parity prices for farmers, even as measured, regulate the value of money? So again, those were the three main claims: the law of economics, the causation, parity prices cause health in the whole economy. I don't doubt that they're correlated. My question is, does causation exist? So again, what I kind of wonder is, does making these extensive parity claims compromise both the food justice movement and the just money movement? My sense is, yeah, a solid maybe, that they're counterproductive, that we would be best served by talking about food justice and just money, because we all want just food. We all want food justice. We all want a satisfying and sufficient income for farmers and a sustainable food economy that is healthy for everyone, the farmers, the people, and the planet. So let's ask, what is the best way to assure that farmers have a satisfactory and sufficient income? And it very well may include many of these policies that are part of that parity platform. I'm not in any way, I'm not a farm expert. I would really want to get all the farmers together to look at what are the policies that will best serve. And I'm kind of prejudiced. I want the policies to serve the organic farmers and regenerative farming, so that we're not destroying the planet in the process. And I think we have to ask, what do we know now that we didn't know before that would help us to arrive at that best solution? We are all dedicating ourselves to moving forward into the future with a money system that pays for a better world. Some of our guides did their research and work in the 20th century using historical resources, even from the 18th and 19th, which isn't to say, I'm not saying I don't think history is important. I'm just saying we cannot say these ideas were good enough for the people I admire, so then it's good enough for me. We live in an information age, and the availability of first sources and the level of scholarship is outstanding. If any of you have been going to the New School's seminar series on empire and currency, my jaw drops every time I go at the level of what they know now that and the kind of research people are doing, I think we need to have humility and curiosity. Yeah. And I also, I highly recommend what I often refer to. I love this website, Your Logical Fallacy. They even have a deck of cards. I think we all have to constantly ask ourselves, well, how do we know this? How can we be sure? Can we test our ideas? So, well, thank you for watching. And I hope I still have friends in the parity movement, because I do love all those people. So I hope you'll forgive my critical look at ideas that I know are very dear to some of you. And I am open to having my ideas contradicted with the data and rationales that would prove me wrong. That would be just fine.
Thank you very much, Virginia. You're finished then for, you're ready for questions, or can you stop sharing your screen by chance?
I sure can. Hold on.
Great. Thank you, Virginia. That was a fantastic presentation. It was hard driving and well presented and very logical and strong, and gave us a lot of food for thought. And we knew in the parity group this was coming, and we worked with you and from all of us. Love you. And I'm gonna stop there. I do have more comments and thoughts directly myself, but I'm gonna hold off. And I'm gonna ask if Randy is available. I want Randy to have first comments, and then as we go into it. But wait, before you going any further, I want to ask, please, are there questions for Virginia? Everybody, you've seen a movie, you've heard, we didn't get a long time or much time to talk about Jerry's historical or parity presentation. And but first, questions for Virginia, and the first question comes from Sue. Randy, we're just going to first have questions for Virginia, and then I'm going to ask you if you could comment or thoughts you may have.
Oh, hi, Virginia. Hi. You know, my study of parity goes back to when it was introduced by speakers into the AMI conference, I guess around 2010. And it really piqued my interest. So I went and really started studying the history of it, you know, the Carl Wilkins and the statistics of the national economy. And I'm just curious, what is your background with studying this parity economy information?
Well, I have a whole stack of books. I mean, I have I've read Unforgiven. I've read all of the materials you guys were studying. In addition to that, I read John D. Black's book on parity, written in mid-century. I've read the Act. I followed along with all your discussions until you guys got tired of my questions and kicked me out. But
no, I wasn't in that group that you were in, that committee.
I mean, I have well, I have more than one. I have multiple binders of things. When people have referred to them, I've read them. You know, I've printed them out and read them and marked all over them. So that's what I brought to it. And I brought a critical eye in the sense of looking at rationales and the base of the data. So I didn't bring this is someone, anyway, that's my background. Did that answer your question?
That, and also the other thing that I wanted to know was, what's your background with the food justice movement, which I don't know anything about?
I love organic food, which I only eat. I have no connection to the food justice movement. My point by including that at the beginning was because I wanted to make the point that I actually think in terms of promoting just money, that it would serve us partly in terms of marketing, to keep using the word justice. There is an environmental justice movement. There is a food justice movement. There is a social justice movement. And part of our argument is that all of those movements depend on having just money at the foundation of society. So I think it would serve building alliances to talk to the farmers and the food producers and the raw material producers about having just food or food justice, which needs the soil of just money under it in order to support it and help it grow. And so I included that at the beginning because I wanted to make it really, really clear, which I hope I did, that I don't have any objection to the goals of parity. I share them. I want our farmers. I don't want all our farmers. I mean, I actually don't want the farmers who won't even go out and eat their own potatoes because the ground is so poisoned. I don't want them to be subsidized. I want the farmers who are doing regenerative organic agriculture to be subsidized. But no, I'm not connected to any farm movement except I like to eat.
Right. I just wanted to point out the focus of Jerry's presentation and the focus of the history of the parity information is the entire economy, not just the production of food. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. I was just, I was muted. I muted myself for a moment. Okay, now, if any other questions for Virginia? Okay. If this video was helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe for new video notifications. Please consider donating at monetary.org/donate. Don't forget to check us out on Twitter at AMI Monetary or on our website